Hello, how's everybody doing? I hope you had a good new year. Well, last time I recorded it was like a couple days after Christmas in Alaska, and it was Luke chapter 13 I did with my brother. But I'm not even ready to post that yet. I'm way ahead of time. I'm way ahead in my recordings. So anyway, the one I'm doing today is Luke chapter 14, and it is Tuesday, January 5th. I am way ahead, I'll just tell you. So, which is nice because I could get behind later. So, I wanted to do Luke 14. I wanted to suggest a book. I mean, I just started reading it. I'm through chapters. The chapters are short, and I'm in the middle of chapter 7, but here it is. I talked a little bit about this. I wanted to read it, The Believer's Authority. It's by Andrew Wommack, and you can get it through Andrew Wommack Ministries. I'm sure you can get it on, like if you're on Audible, I bet you can get it through there, or Amazon or whatever. But anyway, it's an easy read, and it's a good one too. Talking about the believer's authority, which we've touched on a couple times in this Luke study. So I don't really have anything to review. I thought last time was pretty thorough as far as understanding Luke from the perspective of what it was written. So, a lot of the things Jesus was doing was pertaining to the nation of Israel specifically, forcing people by the things he did and said to accept him or reject him, the leaders, the nation as a whole. And then when they officially rejected him, was when he healed the second mute, or cast out the second mute demon. And is that right? Yeah. And they accused him of doing it by the power of Satan instead of the power of God, which was blasphemy. So blasphemy of the Holy Spirit is not something we do. I thought Britt explained that really well. It's something that the nation of Israel did, which sealed their fate as a nation, not as individuals, as a nation, because God is still reaching Israelis to this day. So anyway, and I believe, well, let's just keep going. I can get off, I'll tell you. Let's do Luke chapter 14. Remember last time, remember he healed the woman who was all bent over, and she had been bound by Satan for 18 years. And he healed her. We talked about the parable of the mustard seed. Okay, let's go for it. Chapter 14. It happened that when he went into the house of one of the leaders of the Pharisees on the Sabbath to eat bread, they were watching him closely. And there in front of him was a man suffering from dropsy. And Jesus answered and spoke to the lawyers and Pharisees, saying, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not?" But they kept silent. And he took hold of him and healed him and sent him away. And he said to them, "Which one of you will have a son or an ox fall into a well and will not immediately put him out on a Sabbath day?" And they can make no reply to this. This is so good, I'm telling you. So anyway, he is invited into this house, and we know that. Sorry, I'm taking my coat off. He's invited this house, and we know that because it says so later. But anyway, he is invited by a Pharisee. Now this is a Pharisaical leader. He's a leader. Now, I don't know if our author went by the Greek word, but I don't know if the Greek word is there for leader, but this person would have been considered a high Pharisee, which would be a head of a rabbinic school. So this leader invited Jesus over on the Sabbath. The Sabbath, remember, is their holy day. They're not supposed to work that day. There's all kinds of extra rules that God did not impose, the Pharisaical law. And lost my thought. Oh boy. So anyway, he was invited into this home on the Sabbath. Why would you think that was? They're constantly watching him. They're trying to get him in trouble for doing something on a Sabbath day that is unlawful in their eyes. And they want to disprove him the Messiah. He's already proven himself to be the Messiah. He's healed. He's cast out 2 mute demons, which only the Messiah could do. So they were trying to trap him in some rule, is what they were trying to do. Now, they also invited a man with dropsy. Of course they did. Of course they did. They knew Jesus couldn't resist but heal him. He couldn't help himself. That's what he does. He makes people whole again. He makes people well again. So, yeah. So, no, this is a condition which today we would call edema. And it's like, I read about it. Did I take a picture of it on my phone? I read about it. It had to do with, well, it's like if your body's collecting liquid. Let me just look it up here. Yeah, like if your one part of your body is like retaining liquid. Okay, here's from mayoclinic.org. Edema is swelling caused by excess fluid trapped in your body's tissues. Although edema can affect any part of your body, you may notice it more in your hands, arms, feet, ankles, and legs. Edema can be the result of medication, pregnancy, or an underlying disease. So anyway, it's swelling. WebMD says edema is the medical term for swelling. Body parts swell from injury or inflammation. It can affect a small area or entire body. And if this was very obvious in this man, I bet that's why they invited him. So they could get Jesus to heal him, and then they would get in trouble. Now, look at my pup. Look at my puppy. Look, pup. Oops. I can't get him. There he is. He had to come over once we knew that he knew that I was talking. So my suspicion is that it was very obvious illness because they wanted Jesus to not be able to resist healing this man, which he couldn't. He couldn't resist it. They knew he was going to heal him. He couldn't help himself. It's who he is. It's who he is. So anyway, now, according to Pharisaical law, it was lawful to heal on the Sabbath if the illness was life-threatening. So they must not have thought this was life-threatening or whatever. And remember, I think the Pharisees would let you tend your animals, but they wouldn't let. Anyway, they try to trick Jesus, but they can't. They can't outsmart him. He's God. They can't outsmart him. So let's keep reading. Oh, well, I already read the part I want to talk about. Jesus approached them. Instead of them saying, oh, do you think it's okay to heal on the Sabbath day? Jesus put it on them first. He said to the lawyers and Pharisees, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not? But they wouldn't reply to him. They wouldn't say anything, right? They kept silent. And he took hold of the man and healed him and sent him away. So he kind of heals the man and gets him out of there, all right? And he asked them, if you have an ox fall into a well, will you help him out on the Sabbath day? But they wouldn't say anything. So he puts them in a position where they can't really argue with him, because they all know that if they had an animal that was in trouble on the Sabbath day, they would assist. They know that. So let's keep going with verse 7. And he began speaking a parable to the invited guests. And here, again, we know the guests were invited. I talked to you before about how sometimes when a rabbi was teaching, people would just come in. But it sounds like this was an event where people were invited to. I don't know what the occasion was. But anyway, Jesus went. And you know that he knew that he was going to be set up. He's always set up. They follow him around all over. But like Britt said, Jesus is trying to force them to accept and reject him. But at this point, Jesus is dealing with individuals. And he began speaking a parable to the invited guests when he noticed how they had been picking out the places of honor at the table, saying to them, When you are invited by someone to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for someone more distinguished than you may have been invited by him. And he who invited you both will come and say to you, 'Give your place to this man,' and then in disgrace you will proceed to occupy the last place. But when you are invited, go and recline at the last place, so that when the one who has invited you comes, he may say to you, 'Friend, move up higher.' Then you will have honor in the sight of all who are at the table with you. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted." Now, when I read this, I thought that's the key verse right there. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. That's the whole key to this whole parable. And it was funny because after I read this, I thought that, and then I was reading from my author, and he said the same thing, like, that's the key verse. Like, yes, it is. So it's a lesson in humbling ourselves. And he was, these Pharisees that were out there, they're all proud of who they are. And so they're seeking out the chief seats, wanting to be noticed for their high status. And I wanted to read from my book from page 3. Oh, let me read this next part first. He goes on to say, "And he also went on to say to the one who had invited him," to the Pharisee, the leader of the rabbinic school who invited him, "When you give a luncheon or dinner, do not invite your friends or brothers or your relatives or rich neighbors. Otherwise, they may also invite you in return, and that will be your repayment. But when you give a reception, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed, since they do not have the means to repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." When one of those who were reclining at the table with him heard this, he said to him, "Blessed is everyone who will eat bread in the kingdom of God." Now that saying that man just said will usher us into the next part of this. But let's go back just for a minute. I wanted to read about, how he's saying it, if he's talking to the leader, and he says, invite people who can't repay you back, basically. Let me read. I wanted to read a little bit about what our author said from page 382. So, sorry about yawning. Where's it at? Okay, the principal lesson is that hospitality demonstrates one's love for fellow men. So is the means of fulfilling the righteousness of the Mosaic law. So love your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. The Mosaic law. But, however, a person who invites guests only to accumulate honor for himself cannot expect to be rewarded. So he knows the hearts of these people, and these Pharisees are seeking honor for themselves. Let me read a little more. The hospitality of the Pharisees was self-seeking, self-glorifying, and self-righteous. They only invited people who could repay the compliment. The righteousness of the law, however, demands that hospitality be extended to those who may never have the means to return the favor. Anyway. So, let's go on to the next part. Now, I just read 15 to you, which ushers in the parable of the dinner. So I'm going to read 15 again. When one of those who were reclining at the table with him heard this, he said to him, "Blessed is everyone who will eat bread in the kingdom of God." Now that man, that Jew that said that, he more than likely thought that all Israel would be in God's kingdom. They'd all be saved. They'd all go to heaven. They'd all participate in God's eternal kingdom. He probably believed that, but that's not true. Okay, so let me read the rest. But Jesus said to him, a man was giving a big dinner, and he invited many. And at the dinner he sent his slave to say to those who had been invited, "Come, for everything is ready now." But they all alike began to make excuses. The first one said to him, "I have bought a piece of land, and I need to go out and look at it. Please consider me excused." Another one said, "I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I'm going to try them out. Please consider me excused. Another one said, I have married a wife, and for that reason I cannot come. And the slave came back and reported this to his master. Then the head of the household became angry and said to his slave, Go out at once into the streets and lanes of the city and bring in here the poor and crippled and blind and lame. And the slave said, Master, what you commanded has been done, and there is still room. And the master said to the slave, Go out into the highways and along the hedges and compel them to come in, so that my house may be filled. For I tell you, none of those men who were invited shall taste of my dinner. So, anyway, in that parable, I mean, I think it's pretty clear, even at first reading, that that the person represented by the one who invites all the guests, who is throwing the dinner, is God himself. And you could put Jesus in there. Jesus is God. So God himself. And so that verse 15 that I read to you, when one of those who were reclining at the table heard this, he said to him, Blessed is everyone who will eat bread in the kingdom of God. That was the key to understanding the parable. So Dr. Frottenbaum, he defines the characters in this parable. So let me define them, and then I'm going to read it again for you, okay? So the host is God, okay? Those who prepared the feast were the prophets. I think I said before, the guy who prepared the feast, God. But, okay, the host is God. The people who prepared the feast was prophets. You know, the prophets in the Old Testament, they tell of Jesus coming. The first servant that was set out to declare the dinner was ready is John the Baptist. The original invitees, the people who were originally invited, were the Jewish leaders, and I think that's pretty obvious. Okay, now remember, they've officially rejected him as a nation. Then there's two groups of people that are invited after the original invitees rejected it. So there were those, let me read this verse again. 23, where it says, And the master said to the slave, Go out into the highways and along the hedges and compel them to come in, so that my house may be filled. So the highways could be like the cities, okay? The hedges would be the country, so the rural areas. So those from the city would be the Jews who would come to believe, because there are still Jews, even to this day, who are coming to believe, okay? And back then as well, there were Jewish believers. And then those from the country are the Gentiles who would come to believe. So God is calling them into his kingdom. Let me read that again with those things in mind. But he said to him, A man was giving a big dinner, and he invited many. And at the dinner hour, he sent his slave to say to those who had been invited, Come, for everything is ready now. That would be John the Baptist, right? But they all alike began to make excuses. Remember how John the Baptist prepared the way for Jesus to come? But they all alike began to make excuses. The first one said to him, I bought a piece of land, and I need to go out and look at it. Please consider me excused. Another one said, I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I am going to try them out. Please consider me excused. Another one said, I have married a wife, and for that reason I cannot come. And the slave came back and reported this to his master. Then the head of the household became angry and said to the slave, Go out at once into the streets and lanes of the city and bring in here the poor and crippled and blind and lame. And the slave said, Master, what you have commanded has been done, and there is still room. I'm wondering about that where it says, Go out into the streets and lanes of the city and bring in here the poor and crippled and blind and lame. Anyway, I'm going to keep going. And the master said to the slave, Go out into the highways and along the hedges and compel them to come in, so that my house may be filled. For I tell you, none of those men who were invited shall taste of my dinner. So Israel as a nation has been rejected at this point because they rejected him. So it wasn't his rejection of them, it was their rejection of him. Remember when he said in the last passage that, Israel, Israel, how I long to bring you under, like, a mother hen brings her chicks under her wings. He longed to do that. So, okay, now there's this next section with verse 25. make sure I did everything I wanted to do there. Okay, in this one, he's addressing believers in this next one. And we're going to distinguish between salvation and discipleship. So salvation is free. It's like, we go to heaven because we trust Jesus to pay for our sins. We trust in him. So that's free. We don't have to do anything to get it. Okay? Just believe, which isn't of ourselves. It's a gift of God that no one may boast. So we trust him to save us, and he does. So that's free. But there's a difference between salvation and discipleship. So discipleship is a much stronger commitment. And I looked up discipleship in the Webster's Dictionary online. It said, a disciple is one who accepts and assists in spreading the doctrines of another. So my thoughts about that were one who's all in on the mission of it, somebody who's all in on the mission of it. They're going to go share it with others, or teach, or take it to another level, get deeper into the relationship and participate in what God's doing. Not simply receive what God has done, which is a free gift of salvation, but also participate in the kingdom's work. So let me read this next section to you, which starts with verse 25. Now large crowds were going along with him, and he turned and said to them, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry his own cross..." Okay, let's go over that one first, okay? If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Okay, think of it in this way, because it's kind of figurative language where they're using love and hate. It doesn't mean to hate your family. That's not, it's more figurative than that. So think of love as to choose and hate as not to choose. Okay, so hate is not to choose. Love is to choose. So if you think of it in that way, like if you're a disciple and you had to choose between your relative and Jesus Christ, you would have to choose Jesus Christ to be a disciple. Otherwise, your relatives would stop you from that deeper participation in the kingdom, wouldn't they? And that's not relatively uncommon. I mean, there might be relatives who, they maybe don't like your Christianity, but they're willing to tolerate it, and if so, cool, because they're not pushing you into making a choice. But there will be relatives for some people who they won't have anything to do with you if you choose Christ. So, especially if you're following him, teaching, preaching, sharing, devoted. So it doesn't really mean, it's kind of like in Genesis where God says, "Jacob have I loved, Esau have I hated." It's not love and hate in an emotional sense. It's Jacob have I chosen, Esau I have not chosen, is basically a good way to interpret that. Okay. I don't know if you Genesis people remember that, but you could look into it. Okay, so that's the first lesson. There's 3 lessons in this parable, and that's lesson 1. So the people that are disciples, they must be willing to leave all, because it may, you get rejected for Christianity sometimes. And you have to be willing to be rejected. You can't dump Christ because... Anyway, let me keep going. Verse 27, "Whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which one of you, when he wants to build a tower, does not first sit down and calculate the cost to see if he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who observe it begin to ridicule him." Isn't that sad when you see like a building it's begun to be built, but it's never finished? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who observe it begin to ridicule him, saying, 'This man began to build and was not able to finish.' Or what king, when he sets out to meet another king in battle, will not first sit down and consider whether he is strong enough with 10,000 men to encounter the one coming against him with 20,000? Or else, while the other is still far away, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. So then none of you can be my disciple who does not give up all his own possessions." Oh, wait, I read too far, guys. Or did I? Oh. Okay, I guess the first verse that I read, 27, "Whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple." Hi, puppy. Hi, puppy. So anyway, the second lesson that our author mentions is bearing one's own cross. That's the second lesson of this discipleship parable. So a disciple who identifies with Jesus, Jesus carried his own cross to his crucifixion site, and we will suffer rejection, not to the extreme he did, but we will suffer rejection in some respects. And a lot of times with me, when I've been rejected by someone, it would be for promoting or defending a biblical principle, or it can get people rejected or refusing to participate in some false worship or something. It can get you rejected or whatever. So, and then the rest of it that I read there, the third lesson is counting the cost. So this one is be willing to give up all you have belongs to God. Now, it doesn't really mean that disciples typically own things, though. I mean, some of these disciples, they had to kind of leave everything to follow Jesus, though, because they even left their families behind. And not everyone's called to do that, but basically everything you own is his, because you never know what would be taken from you. I mean, it's all temporal, whereas Jesus Christ is eternal. So, and I don't know if I'm explaining that one very well, but and then the last verse says, the last two verses, 34 and 35, "Therefore, salt is good, but if even salt has become tasteless, with what will it be seasoned? It is useless either for the soil or for the manure pile. It is thrown out. He who has ears to hear, let him hear." So I guess not everybody had ears to hear. But anyway, the salt that came out of the Dead Sea there, if you go to Israel, you can float in the Dead Sea. It's a salt sea. And I've floated in it, and you really do float. There's no danger of drowning out there, because you can't hold yourself down, and there's no danger of it's the Dead Sea. There's no danger of any critters getting you, because there are no critters in there. It's so salty. So, but if you get salt from there, it will lose its flavor over time. And then it's pitched. They throw it away after that. So they had, direct reference because of that. So, people who become disciples and learn these three lessons, our author says, they have flavor. They're, if something's bland, salt helps a lot. Or salt just can make things taste so much better, some things. So, but if salt loses its saltiness, what good is it? So if disciples, if we don't become disciples, or if we're not good disciples, I guess, I don't know, we could lose our saltiness, and what good is that, is basically what it's saying. So anyway, I will see you next week. I won't post this one it's going to be a little over 2 weeks, I think. So, but anyway, I hope you're having a good new year. It's just as much chaos as ever in our country and stuff, but as I look into it, pray about it and all that, boy, this book is just so good. The Believer's Authority, Andrew Wommack. Love it. When I was coming back from Alaska, and I was either on the train or in Seattle Airport, which is a freaking trip, I'll tell you that. Seattle Airport, really, really weird. I won't even get into it, but anyway, and then Denver Airport and all that. And when you're on the trains and you're going up the escalator and you're on the plane, and I just look at all these people, and I saw people are traveling again, you know. Dr. Fauci may not want us to. It's kind of tough because people are. But anyway, you see all these people from different places, including other countries. I saw some people, I knew they were from Japan. You know, Alaska has a lot of Japanese tourists and Japanese people who immigrate or whatever. And then I think I saw people, I thought I recognized them from India. So people are traveling even internationally. And when I was in Alaska, I saw people, like I went to this place, Santa Claus House, which is a great gift shop there. So anyway, I heard a woman, I can't remember where she said she was from. I want to say Michigan or somewhere, and I'd be wanting to get out of Michigan if I were. But anyway, as I looked at them, I just see Adam and Eve's descendants, just all of them. And me too, just Adam and Eve's descendants. That's how I see them, no matter what they look like, no matter where they come from on the whole planet. I see Adam and Eve's descendants just running around, you know, all little great, many great grandchildren of Adam and Eve running around. That's just in my mind. That's what they are, and that literally is what they are. So I don't know why I share that, except that all our Bible studies go together. And Jesus came to save these descendants of Adam and Eve who were running all over those crazy airports. So anyway, I hope you join me next week. Have a good one.